Hello and welcome back to F1 Every Week. I am your host Ben Wevel, and today I will be analysing and reviewing the 7th race weekend of the season, the iconic Monaco Grand Prix, which has been present in all but 5 Formula 1 World Championship calendars over the years. The inaugural race, one of only 7 Grand Prix in the 1950 season, and one of 4 racetracks which remain on the calendar today, excluding Zandvoort, which was a non-championship race that year. Ayrton Senna is the unopposed King of Monaco, with an astounding 6 victories to his name whilst racing in the Principality, followed by Graham Hill and Michael Schumacher tied on 5, and Alain Prost, the Frenchman, on 4. The Grand Prix has played host to some of the most dumbfounding F1 events in history, such as the infamous 1996 Grand Prix, in which Olivier Panis took his one and only victory in the sport in the Ligier, one of only 3 cars to finish the race. Michael Schumacher taking his shock pole in 2012, his only pole in a Mercedes car. Daniel Ricciardo's missing tyres from 2016. Mansell spinning out of the lead in 84. The list just goes on and on. And with rain on the forecast for Sunday, no one quite knew how this Grand Prix, usually dictated by grid position due to the very thin circuit, would pan out. So without further ado, let's get into episode 59. Before we start, I think it's important to think about who needed to perform at the Monaco Grand Prix. First of all were both of the Ferrari drivers, who had both had difficult weekends last time out in Spain. Carlos Sainz spinning at turn 4 but being able to handily recover to the top 5, and Charles Leclerc retiring from the lead. However, it was clear from the first few rounds of racing that Carlos Sainz is not as comfortable with the car as teammate Charles Leclerc, the Spanish driver describing the F175 as difficult to adapt to. But that the extra few tenths which he needs to gain back from Charles is achievable. The only question in my mind is, by the time Carlos has got to grips with the car, will Leclerc already be too far ahead? But that is not to say that it was all plain sailing for Charles either, who saw, as I said earlier, his first DNF of the season at the Spanish Grand Prix last time out, from a very comfortable lead. Indeed, and the upshot of which is that both Max Verstappen sauntered into the lead of the Drivers' Championship and Ferrari were displaced at the top of the Constructors. Therefore, it was doubly important that Charles was able to make it count at home, where luck has not always been on his side in the past. In fact, it's never been on his side, the Monegasque not having finished any Grand Prix in Monaco in any echelon of the sport, full stop. Not finished there once. However, Charles may well have got his crashing at Monaco out of his system for 1 year, having crashed Niki Lauda's classic 1974 Ferrari at Rascasse in the Monaco Historic of earlier this month. And Charles Leclerc really looked on good form in free practice, having topped the times by some margin on 2 of the 3 practice sessions, despite some scary moments at Zandvoort in FP1. Another driver who is really in need of a good weekend at Monaco was Daniel Ricciardo, who has been feeling the pinch as of late from McLaren boss Zak Brown, who mentioned on Friday that there were quote-unquote mechanisms that would make Daniel's early departure from the McLaren team for 2023 a reality. This comment from a clearly frustrated team boss is only the tip of the iceberg for Daniel Ricciardo, who has been struggling ever since his exit from Red Bull in 2018, a decision which, looking back, may have been career-ruining. Somewhat better than a ruined career, though, is a ruined car, and Daniel Ricciardo was experiencing both in FP2, as he had a violent shunt at the swimming pool chicane, followed by an unsatisfactory P16 in final practice the following day, possibly a proleptic marker of what was to come in the weekend. Keep listening to see if Daniel's woes will only increase. Checo Perez is another driver who had a poor weekend last time out. He was very frustrated at his team's decision to switch Max Verstappen ahead of him at the Spanish Grand Prix of last week, and clearly he's not comfortable with his role as number 2 driver in the Red Bull car. But Sergio came back with a bang, setting the fastest time of all on Saturday's practice session, showing up teammate Verstappen, who was 4/10 behind in P4. Finally, for the practice session roundup, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton, who complained profusely about porpoising on Friday, which connotes that despite many changes made to the car in Spain, there's still much work to do if Mercedes wish to be back on par at the top. But setup changes made to the car for Saturday did not seem to make much of a difference, with bouncing still a major issue when the Brit encountered the Nouvelle chicane on a flying lap. Could he turn fortunes around in qualifying? Let's find out. Qualifying in Monaco is, as we know, always key, with the driver at the helm of the grid more often than not taking the victory around this oh-so-tight and twisty racetrack. So, as Q1 got underway, there was a tense atmosphere in the air. It was Ferrari and the home driver Leclerc who would lead the standings early on, taking the fastest time mid-session, avoiding the end of Q1 traffic. Less lucky than Leclerc were Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Lance Stroll, Nicolas Latifi and Zhou Guanyu, who could not rise to the occasion as they were out in the first round of qualifying. Pierre has been looking out of sorts in qualifying so far this year, with his 8 top 5 grid positions in 2021 seeming very far in the past. Is this the fault of an unsatisfactory car, or has Pierre lost some spark in 2022? He's only just slipped into the top 10 3 times out of 7 this year, a stark difference to this time last year, where he had only not made Q3 once. Let's hope that the Frenchman can rekindle some of his great 2021 form next weekend. Zhou was also disappointed with his place at the back of the grid, as the Chinese driver was unable to make it to the start line for his final flying laps before the checkered flag. Another incident to note in Q1 was a red flag, the result of Yuki Tsunoda clipping the Nouvelle chicane. He was, however, able to make it back to the pits and climb to 9th in the closing stages of the session. On to Q2, and Leclerc once more led the field. His domination this year in Monaco, undeniable, with Sergio Perez less than a tenth off the pace. Out in Q1 was Tsunoda, Bottas and both Haas drivers, it being Daniel Ricciardo who split the pair, the Aussie once more underperforming in the McLaren in P14, and left hoping that last year's incident of Lando Norris lapping him at Monaco was not a recurring feature of this race. Bottas also underperformed, Alfa Romeo having had high hopes before the start of the weekend that they might be challenging for a podium, and in 12th and 20th for the team, they have a big mountain to climb if they want to get into that position. On to Q3, and it was Charles Leclerc who took pole position at home for the 2nd season running, but it was once again under controversial circumstances. As the flying laps of Monaco qualifying were reaching their conclusion, Sergio Perez spun into the wall at turn 8 before the tunnel section, Carlos Sainz doing exactly the same, spinning into Sergio Perez and blocking the track, bringing out the red flag, and putting an end to qualifying with 30 seconds remaining. Miraculously, simultaneous to the crash at Mirabeau, Fernando Alonso also crashed into the wall at turn 5. Behind Leclerc was teammate Sainz, who made it Ferrari's second 1-2 of the season so far, with Perez and Verstappen just behind. Despite the late interruptions by way of the red flag, Max had been looking off the pace all weekend, having been 4th in all 3 practice sessions, as well as 4th in qualifying. Leclerc now had a prime opportunity to alleviate the damage done by Max's 3-race win streak. Best of the rest was Lando Norris, with his 3rd top 5 qualifying on the year. And the two Mercedes drivers followed, split by Fernando Alonso, who elevated 10 places from last week's horror qualifying in Spain to 7th. Sebastian Vettel managed P9 as Esteban Ocon rounded out the top 10. Now for my driver of qualifying, and Lando Norris takes this title for me. While his teammate Ricciardo faces yet more issues in his McLaren, Norris's star just continues to rise, with another brilliant top 5 qualifying finish in a car that couldn't even make Q3 at the start of the year. He took a podium here last year, but can he repeat the feat from 5th? Keep listening to find out. Now for my team of qualifying, and it is of course Ferrari. Despite Max Verstappen having been off the pace all weekend up to this point, Sergio Perez was right in the mix, and to lock out the front row at Monaco is a cheat code to success at this circuit. If they bottle it from here, I don't think they even deserve to win the championship. Finally now for my struggle of qualifying, and it's Daniel Ricciardo. I had high hopes for Daniel coming into the weekend, as the Aussie had performed here in the past, having taken victory in 2018 despite a power unit issue, fending off Sebastian Vettel, and almost having won in 2016 as well, but for the team's lack of organisation. But Daniel has done everything in his power to disappoint me this weekend. Not only did he crash in FP2, but he also had a poor final practice in 17th, as I said earlier. But 14th, nearly 10 places behind his young teammate. It's a very dissatisfactory Saturday for the Aussie. Moving on to Sunday, and this race was chaos from start to finish. As Conor McGregor had commented the evening before, a storm was brewing, and this storm came to a head as the race was supposed to be getting underway at 3 p.m. local time, sending the pit lane into a frenzy of mechanics attempting to procure wet tyres for the start of the race, which race control commanded be under the safety car due to the conditions. The race was subsequently red flagged before the first lap had even begun, which seemed to be due to the very, very poor conditions, but was in fact, it had later been discovered, due to a power failure at the circuit. Therefore, the race could not have begun, even in dry conditions. This power issue was alleviated over an hour later, preventing what seemed to many F1 fans to be a direct replica of the non-event at Spa last year. The race got underway and very swiftly a dry line began to form, despite the majority of the field being on full wets, apart from a group at the back who had little to lose in any case. For Pierre Gasly, this intermediate strategy seemed to be working, as the Frenchman passed Daniel Ricciardo for 12th on the Inters on lap 14. Sergio Perez came in for his stop on lap 17 for Inters before Leclerc did the same a lap later, Sergio Perez undercutting Leclerc because of his late decision. But things would really go sour for the home hero on lap 22, when both he and his teammate Carlos Sainz, who was in the lead at that point, were asked to pit for slicks, before both Red Bulls did the same a lap later. Perez coming out in the lead, with Charles Leclerc falling out of the podium positions. Charles was furious at the team for this decision, later describing it as clearly the wrong call. The race would then calm for a few laps before all hell broke loose once more, Mick Schumacher demolishing his Haas at the swimming pool chicane, bringing out the red flag. Despite Sainz's best efforts in the dying stages, Perez held out to take his first victory in Monaco, adding to his 2016 third place here, and the third win in his Formula One career. He has now finished in the top 4 5 times in a row, and is cementing himself as a very consistent Red Bull number 2, only 6 points behind Charles Leclerc in the World Championship. This win will be a great morale boost for the Mexican, who just last week felt so wronged by Red Bull's insistence that he let teammate Verstappen by, but has shown not only to Red Bull that he can